For years, U.S. classrooms looked something like this. The majority of students were white students with similar backgrounds. However, recent census data show a trend towards a more culturally and linguistically diverse society. As the global world continues to weave into U.S. classrooms, it is imperative that our classrooms reflect and celebrate this change.
Within the last 20 years, there has been a steady shift in the racial demographics of our nation. Demographic shifts that have resulted in enrollment milestones. Whereas 20 years ago, minorities made up 35.2% of the student population, these cultural and racial minorities now make up over 50% of the school children population.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 1 in 4 children come from families with 1 or more immigrant parents. These families hail from all over the world, including Mexico, China, India, Philippines, Vietnam, El Salvador, and many more.
This demographic change makes us wonder if the same trend is seen in teacher population. However, recent statistics show that 82% of public school teachers were non-Hispanic white, further widening the gap between teachers and students.
What is the consequence when teachers' experiences are so far removed from those of their students? Let's see what happens when teachers don't have the knowledge about their students' diverse backgrounds.
Let's look at this hand gesture. What would that mean if you were to make this gesture to a student? Perhaps you mean to say okay, but in several countries this gesture is offensive. For example, in Japan it means money, and in Mexico it means sex.
Let's try another example. What would you think if you were speaking to a student and she continued to avert her gaze? Teachers often demand eye contact when speaking to their students, but in many countries, including communities in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, it is often considered more polite to have only brief eye contact when talking to a figure of authority.
One more experiment. What would you do if you saw a child come into school with these marks on his back? As mandated reporters, we might consider this to be a sign of abuse. But this practice is actually a traditional Asian method called coining, which is used to relieve someone of an ailment.
With a growing culturally and linguistically diverse community, it is unacceptable to be culturally incompetent any longer. Cultural incompetency doesn't mean that you don't want to be culturally knowledgeable, it just means that you don't currently have the knowledge, which can lead to serious misunderstandings.
How do we address cultural incompetency?
We propose a mandated cultural competency workshop which would have 3 areas of focus: interpersonal communication, effective trust-building strategies, and culturally sensitive lesson planning.
The workshop would begin with a reflective piece on cultural sensitivity.
Participants would then watch videos of interactions between teachers and teachers and teachers and parents, and would begin an open discussion about the cultural discourse they saw. They will practice engaging in sensitive and respectful inquiry about what they noticed and wondered in regards to culture.
Then, participants would be given realistic scenarios between teachers, students, and parents, and then share out how they would react in a respectful and culturally sensitive way. These 2 activities would help the participants develop their interpersonal communication and trust-building skills.
Finally, participants would work on developing their culturally sensitive lesson planning skills. They would develop a lesson plan, role play within a small group, and provide feedback for their peers from both the child and teacher's point of view.
In addition to a mandated workshop, we would like to advocate for annual professional development sessions regarding cultural awareness and knowledge, to keep teachers educated in the latest cultural sensitivity research, and to develop culturally sensitive family events and address school-specific concerns.
Further, we would advocate for more face-to-face time to collaborate with parents beyond the typical allotment of 10 minutes for conferences. It is essential that parents be a part of the process of filling gaps in cultural incompetency.
There are, however, notable limitations, including finding trained professionals to coordinate and run the workshops, funding for the process, getting approved by the state to make it a requirement, and having administrations on board with the idea to enforce it with their faculty and hold them accountable.
Despite the noted limitations, with a growing culturally and linguistically diverse population, we hope this presentation made you stop and reflect on your own cultural knowledge and ultimately remember where the heart of our teaching should be.
Created using Powtoon.